ordered held without bond. Pat Cipollone, former President Trump's former White House counsel, has agreed to testify to the House January 6th committee. He was subpoenaed last week after weeks of public pressure to testify, although he could still invoke attorney-client privilege to specific questions asked of him by committee members. America is listening to Fox News.
Half a day. Patsy Gogri from Security Title here with information about what a title company does. The title side of our business determines who owns a property and guarantees your ownership with a title insurance policy. The escrow side acts as an independent third party, managing the transfer of money and documents between the buyer, seller, lenders, and others. Security Title has a management of real estate closings down to a science. Give us a call. We are here to help.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's Best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus to naktak, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tumon location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
FBI Director Christopher Wray and the head of Britain's domestic intelligence agency warning business leaders that China is targeting their intellectual property.
The Chinese government is set on stealing your technology, whatever it is that makes your industry tick, and using it to undercut your business and dominate your market. And they're set on using every tool at their disposal to do it.
Wray speaking to a conference in London. The Justice Department is now investigating efforts by the state of Texas to slow illegal immigration.
With record numbers of illegal crossings at the U.S. southern border, Texas Governor Greg Abbott created a multi-billion-dollar border security mission, including use of the National Guard to arrest people and busing migrants to Washington, D.C. The Republican governor claiming inaction by the federal government. The U.S. Justice Department now is looking into accusations of potential civil rights violations and discrimination based on race, color, or national origin by organizations receiving federal funds. All of this comes as illegal crossings are at a record high and following the discovery of 53 people dead in a sweltering tractor trailer used by human smugglers. Ann Carrick, Fox News.
Several Texas counties recently declaring they're being invaded and asking the federal government to protect them from the wave of illegal immigration. 2 women are scheduled to be sentenced Thursday in southern Arizona for their convictions for ballot harvesting during the 2020 primary election. It's a practice that's been illegal in Arizona since 2016. NASA says contact has been restored with its $33 million spacecraft that's headed to the moon to test out a lopsided lunar orbit. Craft spent nearly a week circling the globe out of contact with mission control, but now the space agency says the spacecraft is in good health and operated safely on its own during the outage. The cause of that communications drop-off still under investigation. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Gas is expensive, so let the bank come to you. Through our remote deposit capture, you can deposit your checks into your account from your phone. And with our Dynamite Bank Pacific Visa debit card, you can use your money anytime, anywhere. It's the perfect combo.
Now we're banking on the future. Services to choose. Bank Pacific, where others put branches, we place roots.
Equal housing lender. Member FDIC. Crank it up.
Choice Broadcasting introduces their unbeatable lineup of morning show.
Hands down winners of Guam's morning radio battle.
Daryl Lizama grooves his way through Boss 104 playing Guam's favorite classic hits.
Morning mouth Ray Gibson shakes the cage on 93.3 The Point.
And now, we are proud to announce the Morning Blender with Kyle Mandapat, mixing it up at sunrise on Star 101.
If you're an advertiser trying to reach the most valuable ears, we've got the shows that listeners have been tuning into for decades.
One call gets all 3.
671-888-7346. That's 888-REIO.
Are you looking for a new place to hang out with your friends? Let's go along the sidelines at Sidelines Bar and Grill. Located at 154 Iriarte Road, Unit 4 and 5 in Tamuning behind Royal Bigs. Sidelines, a hidden gem with nothing but great things to offer. Great atmosphere, great food, top shelf drinks, and a great team. What are we waiting for? Let the fun begin at Sidelines Bar and Grill. Open daily from 3 p.m. to 2 a.m. See you there.
Welcome
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state or the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Here we go on a Thursday afternoon, another exciting episode of Tall Tales. Let's start out with Zemi Ikotny. Zemi Ikotny, my backwards bilingual play on words. Translated literally, Zemi Ikotny means press the meat. I turn it around and translate it into English so that it becomes meat the press, and it's my parody of what Chuck Todd used to do until he got canned. The original design was to examine the editorials for each of the newspapers, go through them unmercifully with my blue pencil, find all the grammatical errors, usage errors, and faulty series, mark them up, and if one editorial exceeded the other, it would get the coveted blue star. But I'll tell you, the design has not worked very well for a long, long time. For a long time, the Daily News didn't do any editorials, any local editorials. They just kept running boilerplate from USA Today. Then they started doing editorials again, but literally 90% of the time, their editorials look more like news stories or public service announcements recast so they can go on the editorial page. No blue stars. And the Post quit running editorials altogether a couple months ago. Now, the Post has a new publisher, a gentleman named Henry Titano. And Mindy, the old publisher, had bagged it a month and a half ago. So apparently something is going on at the Post that the Post isn't covering in its news stories. And I can only speculate that that has something to do with the fact that they're not running any editorials anymore. I hypothesize that the way not to anger anyone with your editorials, and if you don't, then you're really not writing editorials or writing something else. The way not to anger anyone with your editorials is to just don't write editorials at all. Don't publish editorials in your newspaper. Perhaps that's what the Post is doing. Bad on them, because in an island like this, a town like this, your real competitive advantage, if there are two papers, is the kind of editorials you put out. You're all going to cover the same car accidents. You're all going to interview the same government officials and do a really poor job of it in the process. So that leaves editorials. Today's editorial in the Daily News is just about the same. Oh yeah, I forgot. Public service news or perhaps feel-good editorials. Each year in July, Guam pauses to remember the bravery, sacrifice, and ingenuity of those who endured the wartime invasion, occupation, and liberation of Guam. For American sailors, soldiers, and Marines, the Battle of Guam began when the first liberators swarmed the beaches on July 21, 1944, and ended when the island was declared secure on August 10, 1944. But for the island residents, the last few weeks of Japanese occupation involved forced marches to concentration camps, relentless bombing by American ships and planes, forced labor, and massacres. Each year, fewer and fewer survivors remain to remind us of the strength and resilience of the Chamorro people during that time. As memorial services are held around the island this month, We encourage people to go and listen to the precious stories of war survivors. Hear stories being recounted by those who lived it. Those who attended or watched video coverage of Sunday's memorial services at the Menengan Memorial and Asinan couldn't help but be moved by the memories of survivors and their families. Our liberation memorials don't just mark specific sites where atrocities occurred. They mark the events that shaped the island and the people who rebuilt the island. We need to learn that history, and listen to those stories. More memorials are scheduled throughout the month, beginning with today's 9 a.m. observation at the 5th Marine Field Service Depot Memorial in Mighty. The 5th Marine Field Service Depot. 59 years ago, the remnants of the 5th Marine Field Service Depot were called George Washington High School, because the 5th Marine Service Depot consisted of several very large Quonset huts. When the Marines moved out, the government of Guam took those over, and that's where George Washington High School was located until it blew away in Typhoon Karen in 1962. Yeah, so that whole area up there. And the 5th Marine Service Depot, I read somewhere, was the largest collection of war material ever assembled in one location. That's what they're going to use to reconquer Japan, or to conquer Japan. 5th Marine Service Depot, Field Service Depot. The monument marks the role of the depot in the development of Mong Toto Mighty area, where many civilians found jobs after the war. At 9 a.m. Friday, a ceremony will be held at Kalagwak Memorial in Tidzin. The memorial is dedicated to Chamorros who were forced to build an Imperial Japanese airfield using picks and shovels during the war. All right, then there's another list. There's a longer list of memorials here that you can read on your own. These memorials, separate from celebrations and festivities, are a time to remember. For those of us who weren't around during or immediately after the war, they are a time to listen and to learn. We'll hear the history of the island, and we'd better pay attention. It's our job to keep that history alive. If John Gerber were here with me, he would say, and let's remember that 1,528 United States Marines lost their lives in the liberation of this island. All right, so much for Demi Ikotny. Let's go on to the card. And on today's card, I'm going to finish up what I started yesterday, GPA versus higher power bills. Believe it or not, the Power Authority is fighting higher power bills. Then I've got a supplement or a sequel to Robert Underwood versus the 4th of July. It's called Rosa Brooks versus Robert Underwood, to see who could, and we'll have to determine who has the worst case of oikophobia between the two. And I'll touch on Calamity Jane versus the Bureau of Women's Affairs, and then move on to Time versus Levin, which is probably the main event. You'll know that last night, Levin Camacho, our esteemed Attorney General, wrote a letter to Vanessa Williams, Jane Flores, and the governor, where he told them that they don't have to worry about Bell's Law. He called it an opinion. And some stuff that's been on the card for a while: Clint versus gas, progressives versus democracy, the governor versus U.S. citizenship. But of course, we have to start with Paul Zerzan and systemic racism. I don't think I need to explain it today. I think everybody remembers the difference between the agenda and the truth and the facts. Going on from there, we go into the Public Law 34, as you were 38-34 part of the agenda, where once again I spot the stupidity of directors of government agencies who can't put out an agenda that doesn't put all the business that they transact at a meeting at risk. You will recall that each of the meetings, the 1 week and the 2-day notices of meetings, mandatory notices of meetings of all boards and commissions must contain the agenda of the meeting, and the agenda must be in sufficient detail to put the reader on notice as to what will be discussed. Classic example how not to do it. The Port of Guam will hold a meeting on July 14, and item 5 on their agenda is 5 old business. What old business? Oh, they're not going to tell you. Just something that they talked about before, and they're going to talk about again, and they might act on it. That makes your agenda wrong, and you run the risk of having everything done at your meeting voided. And that might be important because you want to act on Resolution 2022-15 relative to authorizing the general manager to explore and pursue the benefits of becoming a member of the International Association of Ports and Harbors. Okay, next item on the card, the Guam Preservation Trust. Once again, they've listed item 3, old business, item 3, new business, but they haven't told us what either one of them is. And then I've got let's see, now I'm surprised about this one. This is the
GEC?
Election Commission.
So was I.
Yeah, Maria almost always gets everything right, and Maria made the new business error this time. Very, very surprising. She's listed 8 new business without telling us what it is. Can't do that. Okay, so then we go from there to GPA versus higher fuel prices. And the first part of the article, which I read yesterday, tells you about how fuel prices are going to go up. In fact, have gone up already. The rate went from 20.9 cents per kilowatt hour to 25 cents per kilowatt hour on the 1st of this month. And then on September 1st, it's going to go to 29 cents per kilowatt hour. And then let's see, 29 cents per kilowatt hour, which will take your power bill up. Both of those together will take the average power bill up about $86 a month. So you're probably sitting out there saying, now why did Bob put that on the car as GPA versus higher power bills when the power authority GPA is raising power bills? And the rest, now I'll tell you the rest of the story. The Power Authority has a number of projects that are intended to reduce fuel imports and save money for ratepayers. Now, the increases in costs that I told you about are because the price of oil went up. We burn oil in our power plants, and almost all of our power, not all, but almost all of them. When the price of oil goes up, they've got to raise the price of power, or we won't have the money to buy more oil. Without oil, we pretty soon run out of power, and it would be a disaster. Read up on Sri Lanka a little bit to see what happens when you don't pay for your oil. Sri Lanka at one time was a relatively prosperous country. Today it's in the toilet. Okay. The second utility, let's see, the Power Authority has a number of projects they're undergoing, include the utility-scale solar facility projects such as the newly commissioned solar farm owned by KEPCO. This is the second utility-scale solar farm to come online and should save GPA about 240,000 barrels or 10 million gallons of fuel each year. At $127 a gallon, that much fuel amounts to $30.5 million. That's what I'm saying. GPA is fighting high power bills. GPA will purchase solar power from KEPCO at a rate of 8.5 cents per kilowatt hour compared to what we're having to charge you for now, 29 cents an hour. It's quite a savings. There's another solar farm in development by Hanwha Energy Corporation. This project should deliver similar savings as the KEPCO facility. A third phase solar project is also in the works. The commissioning of the new Ukudu power plant in 2024 is expected to stack savings for ratepayers when combined with the solar projects. The utility's goal is to bring the surcharge down by 2025 to 17 cents per kilowatt hour. GPA officials have sent customers tips on how to reduce power. Turn off the lights in the daytime. Use outdoor air to help cool your home before turning on the air conditioning. Well, that only works if outdoor air is cooler than what's in your house. Chances are it isn't. Clean air conditioner filters.
That's a good one, actually.
Yeah. Cover your windows with curtains or shades to prevent sunlight's heat from entering. Plug electronics into a power strip and turn off when not in use. Also, unplug small appliances such as coffee makers that are not in use and unplug devices that have been fully charged. This won't save you any power, but it's good exercise to bend over and plug those things in that have to be
It's
plugged
about
in.
$1 or so per year.
Yeah.
You know what's interesting, though, is I wonder, and I haven't cost this out lately, there's the new tinting for your windows that are kind of clear for the houses, and it blocks the UV rays. It's very expensive to get it for their house, but I wonder if now it's caught up to the price of electricity. Like it'd be more cost effective to get the tinting for your windows.
Caught up with the price of what?
Of electricity.
Yeah.
The rates.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. When Typhoon Pamela blew out our windows, I replaced them with tinted glass. I don't know if it saves us any money or not, but it makes it awful dark inside, and we got to turn the lights on in the daytime. So 6 of one, half dozen of the other. The clear, I've read about the clear.
It really works.
Does it?
Yeah, it does. I felt the little, you put a heat lamp and put a pane of glass with that tinting on there. You do not feel the heat on the other side.
Whoa.
Yeah, even after a couple of minutes.
Well, I got to caution you about something, though. All heat is not equal. There's conductive heat. Red hot stove burner, you put your hand on the burner, the heat is conducted from the burner into your hand, right?
Inductive?
Let's see, radiant and then convective. Convective, yeah. So if you have a fan that blows hot air, and you were using what for your test?
They were using a heat lamp, but I think it was just for conventions.
A heat lamp.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the only heat that would come through then would be radiant heat, and heat lamps are not designed to produce radiant heat. They're designed more to produce convective heat.
Warm the air.
Yeah.
Got it.
Whereas when the sun shines through a window, that's radiant heat. And when when those sun's rays hit something, even air, it'll heat them up, the radiant heat. So that may not have been the best test you could construct.
Today's Tall Tales has a science bonus.
Yeah, well,
very good.
Yeah, and caveat, that wasn't a tall tale.
No, not at all. But this is from one of those what do they call it when they have those conventions and all the businesses come out with their new products.
Yeah.
And they want to have everyone test everything right there at their booth. So that's probably what they're doing. But you're exactly right. The radiant heat.
Yeah.
But it's amazing because it's clear.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what I like about it. But a lot of people like tint.
And that's what I don't. I hate tint on cars. If I were the Ayatollah here, no cars would have tint on them because it's dangerous. You know, you can't make eye contact with it if you're a pedestrian. So often you don't know if he sees you or not. And he probably doesn't because he's got that heavy tint.
I've been in some cars with tint that it's nighttime inside, daytime outside.
Yeah. And then when cars have tint on the back window, you can't see through the car. And back in the days when we didn't tint windows, that was a very helpful thing because you could see through the car ahead of you and see what was up there. You know, whether or not there was another car, he was following another car too closely or whatever. But it's all gone. And you know how that happened?
How did that happen?
This is right up Telltale's alley because it has a judicial dimension. We came out with a statute that outlawed, in fact, I think it was Don Parkinson that may have done it. I'm not sure. But outlawed tinted windows on cars except factory-installed tint. So you couldn't just, you know, buy the sheets and tint your windows, etc. And, of course, the factory-installed tint has to meet DOT requirements, etc. So it's less objectionable than the stuff that it gets, the aftermarket stuff. So a guy named Tom Hertzlet had tint on his windows. He was cited for it, went to traffic court, raised a constitutional challenge saying this is a denial of equal protection because it's harder on aftermarket tinted windows than it is on factory-made tinted windows.
He didn't cite Roe versus Wade and the right to privacy?
Nor the Insler cases.
He would have won.
He would have. Well, he did. Now, this is the traffic court. It's not a court of record. In other words, you can't go down and you can't buy a recording of what happened at traffic court. It's not a court of record. Paper enters called the judgment, etc. And it was a horrible decision. I'm not saying it was a horrible decision because I don't like tinted windows, but if you were to run it through the standard equal protection test, was there a rational basis for that state law, and was it a statutory law, and was the law narrowly tailored to reach that objective? Yes. It would not have been held objective. It would not have been held in violation of the due process clause at all in a court. Now, the traffic court is not a court of record. Judge Joaquin Manabusan, the elder, was not a judge.
Magistrate?
I'm sorry, he was a judge. He was not a lawyer. He'd never been to law school. So my analysis was, had that gone before a court, you know, it would have been found constitutional and Tom would have had to pay the ticket. From traffic court, you have a right to an appeal de novo to the Superior Court. In other words, you file your notice of appeal, you go and you start over again. It's really not even an appeal, it's a new trial. And you would have gone before a judge who has had a law degree and was a member of the bar. Unfortunately, our Attorney General at the time did not take that appeal. It just boggles the mind why she didn't. And we've been stuck with tinted windows ever since.
Did you see the tint on her car?
Yeah. This was Elizabeth Barrett Anderson, was the Attorney General.
I don't know. I'm just putting it out there.
Yeah. Yeah, well.
Coming after the break, we talk about T-squares and
talk about
sheetrock.
what?
T-squares and sheetrock.
There you go. Okay, so much for GPA. Let's not be too hard on GPA when the tendency is this. My power bill went up again. Those damn idiots at GPA, what are they doing? They got too many employees. They're wasting too darn much money up there. We should do away with GPA. The hell with GPA. You know, you hear this all the time. Simon was on the show and said their operating costs have not risen in 9 years. The only thing that goes up and down is the fuel adjustment factor. GPA can't control the price of fuel, but it's got to buy it. And over the years, they've cut down, they've pared down the payroll, et cetera. I remember when they got water meters that could be read remotely, they laid off eight meter readers. Now, this caused a lot of consternation out in the community. You can't do that. You can't lay off GovGuam workers. They've got mortgages. They've got families to feed. Yeah, true enough. So that's my 2 cents worth about GPA today. Let's take a short break and we'll come back to the next item here.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
We're already Pika's best radio station, but we're always looking for ways to be even better. Announcing the point on Alexa. In addition to our FM and HD radio feeds, our incredible app, informative website, Facebook Live, and YouTube Live, you can now tell Alexa to stream the point. And your smart speaker will start playing whatever we're saying. News and views 24/7 with your 4-word command. Alexa, stream the point.
And now, back to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the one radio show politicians don't want you to listen to. Call now, 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
So here we go. Benny Doso, Tautau, Bonnie Suba, and Jose Ted Pajago give us a little advice, and I'm going to turn into how to save power. Don't be opening your refrigerator all the time to see what you could snack on. And Benny also takes that a step further by saying, take a peek inside the fridge to see, so you don't keep opening it to see how empty it is. Jose said, this is why I stopped watching the Food Channel. I get all worked up, open the fridge hoping a miracle happens, then end up eating Ichiban. Somebody else posted, yeah, or like when your in-laws come over to do their laundry and eat all your pork chops. That's, stop letting these things happen. You'll save power and pork chops. Okay, next item on the card, Rosa Brooks versus Underwood, which is a sequel to Underwood versus the 4th of July. And you'll require, on yesterday, which was the 4th of July in the mainland, I read Robert Underwood's column where he really just trashes the United States and all of the historical traditions, the founding fathers, etc. And, of course, he winds up by saying, we're just a colony and we don't get to play, and on and on and on. And the song that he sings every time he hears a doorbell ring, he sings that song. So, I put this challenge out, Robert. Well, what's the alternative? Because there are only two real alternatives. Stay as we are and try to work on making our situation in the American political family as good as we can, or for Guam to become independent. Those are the only two alternatives. Statehood is a practical impossibility. Free association isn't even worth talking about. But Robert comes up with the same, beats this same old dead horse over and over again. That poor horse has probably been back and forth to purgatory 4 times.
You've mentioned a lot of times that, our country didn't start out as perfect.
Right.
More perfect, yes, if that can happen. But the dirty little secret about people who complain about the 4th of July and hating Independence Day, if it wasn't for the Constitution and setting up independence, an independent country, none of this mitigation would happen.
Yeah.
Because there would be no foundation to fix everything.
Exactly. And that's the point that I wanted to dwell on yesterday, that the people that created the system with the Declaration and the Constitution were mortal, fallible men like all men are. And I clarified, once again, I'm not anti-women because I use the word men. But when you consider where they were, what they had to work with, the times, the environment of the society or the world that they lived in, what they did was nothing short of a miracle. And although they didn't solve the problems of the world, they built a mechanism that would constantly work on solving the problems, and solved an awful lot of those problems, and is still working on solving the problems, notwithstanding the naysayers like Robert Underwood, who keep complaining that, all they live in a free country, in a free society, and don't have representation in Congress because of the way that system is designed, that the whole system is horrible. And he can't resist the opportunity to beat up on it. So I call his bluff by saying, Robert, why don't you come right out and tell us what has to be done then? According to what you've been saying, apparently Guam must be independent, has to be independent. Why aren't you saying that? And then testing his, kind of laying the hypocrisy rap on him. Robert, you say we're never listened to, but you were in Congress for 5 terms. You could have introduced an enabling act for the statehood of Guam. You could have introduced a bill in Congress for the United States to make the island of Guam independent. Which one of those did you do? You didn't do either one. You'd much rather just bitch. Okay, before I go into Rosa Parks, I notice I see Rosa Brooks. I got somebody on the line here. It's none other than Cabral, Transportation Services for Veterans. When I finish Rosa Brooks, I'll talk about transportation services for veterans. Okay, Rosa Brooks versus Robert Underwood to see who's better at oikophobia. Georgetown University law professor Rosa Brooks has drawn accolades and criticism for her appearances on PMS-NBC's The Readout. Now, I don't watch that show very often. I can't stand it.
Very often?
Once in a while, just to see how the other half lives. I've renamed the show Joy Can't Read. After declaring that Brooks declared that Americans are, quote, slaves to the U.S. Constitution, and the Constitution itself is now the problem for the country. Brooks was criticizing the gun rights generally by extension, the Second Amendment decision in the Bruin case. Quote, I was thinking, boy, those sounds are like sounds you hear in war zones. And there are people all over the world who have lived through armed conflicts. And when does the mortar fall on your house? When does the soldier or the tank come down the street and just kill you? We are now living in that world too, and we have brought it on ourselves. We can't say, oops, it's the Russians' fault. They shouldn't have invaded us. This is us. This is 100% us. And it's because we're essentially slaves to a document that was written more than 230 years ago by a tiny group of white slave-owning men. How could it possibly be any good? And of course, they weren't all even slave-owning men. I think 40% of them may have been slave-owning men. But the narrative is the important thing here. And we cannot break out of the bondage that we've imposed on ourselves from feeling like we have to do everything by our Supreme Court has decided in reference to this ancient document, which is just not serving us well. Now, I'd add my own comment here. It won't let us butcher babies in utero. What kind of a document is this? It's causing enormous problems and enormous tragedies at this point. Brooks is not alone in saying the Constitution is the work of racists and the source of many of our problems. CBS recently featured Boston University professor Ibram X. Kendi, whose name I think is Ben Rogers or something like that, his real name. But his academic name is Ibram X. Kendi, and he is really big into anti-racism. He proclaimed that the Second Amendment was little more than the right to enslave. PMSNBC commentator and Nation's Justice correspondent Ellie Mistel has called the U.S. Constitution trash and argued that we should literally just dump it. Mistel, who also writes for Above the Law, previously stated that white, non-college educated voters supported Republicans because they care about, quote, using their guns on black people and getting away with it. This is the intelligentsia, the academic elite.
I don't say that there are not people who think this way, but for them to put them on the air as a kind of mainstream voice is just despicable.
It appears that the Constitution became the problem when a majority of justices dared to follow an opposing interpretation. That's why I always bring this one to the show with me. Yeah. An opposing interpretation. That is now like how a constitutional system that is not how a constitutional system works. You do not support it so long as it yields to you do not support it so long as it yields to your demands or views. It is a crisis of faith that I've previously discussed, but is most alarming when voiced by law professors. And that is scary because, as I mentioned, when we talked about the first-year class at Yale, driving a couple of speakers out of the room because they were saying wrong speak. When your law schools go to hell, your country is really in danger because these guys wind up running the country. Recently, I criticized fellow law professor Josh Chaffetz, who supported more aggressive protests targeting justices when the mob is right. If the mob is right, you can be more aggressive than if it's just a mob being a mob.
Mostly peaceful.
Yeah. Such voices are common at Georgetown and other law schools. What is not common are conservative or libertarian voices, including the voice of Professor Ilya Shapiro, who was effectively forced off the faculty due to a controversial tweet. As discussed earlier, Madisonian democracy is based on the premise that despite our factional differences, the Constitution creates an interest in all groups in preserving the system. While the Constitution does not guarantee that your views will prevail in Congress or in the courts, it has proven the most suitable and successful democratic system in history. We are all invested in that system, which has achieved transformative changes over time in our laws and our society. Professor Brooks is correct when she says that this is us. This is 100% us. It is about a common article of faith, not with our government, but with each other. These are the voices of the faithless. However, most Americans retain faith in the Constitution. It is in our DNA precisely because it is about us and our common commitment to live by these constitutional principles that have long defined it. But boy, there are an awful lot of people trying to wreck it. And Robert, you're one of them. Great 4th of July exercise. I think that it was close, but I think you beat Rosa Brooks as far as being the greatest oikophobe by a nose. Okay, next, see, I've got Cabral wants to talk about transportation service for veterans. We're going to take a short break, and we'll come back and we'll give the microphone to Cabral.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's Best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus to naktak, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tuman location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
Get ready to save up and chow down with Pacific Points. Now you can redeem Pacific Points for UnoGo wallet credits and enjoy huge savings on food delivery. Order from over 80 restaurants and have it delivered straight to your door. Continue earning points when you fuel up at Shell, shop at Foodies, purchase ITNE prepaid load, and pay your monthly ITNE bill. Then get ready to claim your rewards. Learn more at PacificPoints.com. Pacific Points. Do more, get more.
Okay, so let's see what Cabral wants to tell us about transportation for veterans. Go for it there, Cabral.
Yeah, I hear you. You hear me?
No, I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Nope, I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. I'm calling about a service that was available until just recently. I had some surgery in January or February, and I had been using TRTA's van so I could go with a wheelchair for medical appointments, and it was no problem. But then on these last couple of appointments, they had said they can't provide the service anymore. Nobody would give me a reason, so I called the VA down in Assam, and they told me that they have a grant that they're supposed to be able to provide this. How do we get around all of this bureaucracy and red tape to find out how we can get this service back on? Not just for me, but I know there's a lot of other vets that need some help on this.
You're talking about the Veterans Service Office in Assen, right?
Right, yes.
And they said that they had a grant to provide the transportation for disabled veterans, but the grant ran out. Is that it?
No, as far as they know, it hasn't run out.
And they told you that they stopped doing it because?
Nobody would give me a reason. He was supposed to call the director. I'm sure you know who he is.
Yeah. And
he didn't want to call directly because he didn't want to, let's say, break chain of command.
Mm-hmm.
Jump over his pay grade or whatever.
Uh-huh.
So I haven't heard anything back from them, but he told me that the grant was still in effect as far as he knew.
Yeah, well, I think if it were me, what I would do is I would call and ask to speak to the director. And I would make a record. I would call, at say 8:30 in the morning, say I'd like to speak to the director, and you'll probably get the usual, he's not at his desk, etc. And I would be, I I'd be persistent, and I'd say, well, when will he be back at his desk? And I would make a record, and I'd spend at least a day doing this, maybe 10 or 11 phone calls, making a record of all the times that you were put off. And and then I would write a letter to the director memorializing your inability to talk to him on the phone, and telling him that you have to have an answer to the question, why aren't you providing that bus service? And leave it there. And then if that doesn't work, then write an open letter to the director and publish it in the newspapers, and copy the governor in on it. That would be what I would do, Cabral.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds like some action.
Okay?
All right.
Good luck.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Right. Right.
Okay. Yeah, when you're,
it's persistence.
It is. And calling a government office is, I just dread it. Because there seems to be a rule in the government that you put somebody at a telephone who can't help you. May I help you? Okay, I'd like to speak to the director. Oh, he's not here now. I see. When will he be back? I have no idea. Next year? Oh, no. He'll be here before lunch. Well, you told me you had no idea. No. And you got to keep going over this stuff. Could I have him return your call? No, I want to call him. Because could I have him return the call? You say yes, you've lost control of the situation. You don't want to let him have control. So you say, I want to talk to him. You tell me when he'll be there, and I will call. Now, it's easy for me to say because I'm not dependent on bus service. I'm not a person with a disability. If I have to, I go down there. And I frankly make a pest out of myself. It's unfortunate that you have to do that, but sometimes that's the only way you can get results with this government. I don't know if this government is any different from any other government. I think that governments tend to do this sort of thing. Private businesses that don't provide good customer services oftentimes go out of business. The government never goes out of business. When the government runs into a rough spot in their operations, they ask for a larger budget. Yeah, well, we can't return all those calls because we've only got 14 telephones and we've only got 20 people to answer them. So we got to have another $100,000 for more phones and more people to work the phones. Yeah.
For training.
For training, yeah. But, the one thing that directors of agencies really don't like very much is embarrassment. And sad to say, that's where the open letter to the editor comes in. A letter to the governor ought to work. I don't know if it ever has with this governor. I haven't followed.
Not if your name is more than.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Oh, okay. Well, anyhow, Cabral, good luck, and I hope things work out for you. Next on the card, I'm just going to touch bases here with Calamity again. You remember Calamity Jane is the director of the Bureau of Abortion, also known as the Bureau of Women's Affairs. She's done everything she could with her position to a government job that pays her close to $100,000 in salary and benefits. I had that sheet here somewhere. Pays her big bucks.
It's about 90,000. This is just under 100,000.
Yeah, 97 or so. Yeah, and she has been instrumental in recruiting 2 doctors from Honolulu to come here, be admitted to practice, so they would have standing to raise suit in the suit of Redu and Kaneshiro versus public health, etc. In order so they could prescribe chemical abortions by mail. This was Jane's doing, working this out. She makes no bones about trying to find an abortionist to come to the island. despair about Roe versus Wade, etc.
If I was purely using hyperbole, I'd call them contract killers. But that's if I use hyperbole.
There you go. Yeah. So they have the Bureau of Women's Affairs has a Facebook page, and this is what they ran on it up until about, at 4 o'clock yesterday, Jose? This is what they read. The Bureau of Women's Affairs is working to reduce unplanned pregnancies and reduce the need for abortion. Abortion should be safe, legal, and rare in our community if people have access to birth control and emergency contraception. And then this. If you're a Christian who's happy about Roe v. Wade getting overturned, I'd like to remind you that the purpose of your religion is not to judge or condemn others. It's not your job to police or control other people. Your job as a Christian is to evangelize through your actions and way of life. That joy you're feeling from Roe versus Wade getting overturned isn't because God has worked. What you're feeling is a perverted sense of satisfaction, not because you've, quote, saved lives, but because you were able to exert control over other people. You're feeling powerful and vindicated because you didn't want someone to do something and acted your will on them. Your joy isn't about God. It's about making yourself feel just. When you lay down in bed tonight, all alone and in the dark, listen to your spirit. What you'll feel tonight may just be the devil smiling at the corner of your bed because he knows that you like the feeling he gave you today. Official government Facebook, government director in the governor's cabinet, no less.
Gives a mini homily.
On the payroll, coming out and giving religious instruction. Yeah. Isn't that an establishment of religion? Isn't that prohibited?
Sounds like it.
By the First Amendment?
I was waiting for lesson 2, what the faith says about killing unborn children. But they removed the post. So
yeah. Yeah, so this is the Bureau of Women's Affairs and Jane Flores. You know, just everything that you despise about abortion, but couldn't put a face to. All right, let's take a break for our big halftime show.
KUSG, Hagatna, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
He's admitted it. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. The man charged with killing 7 people at a suburban Chicago Independence Day parade.
Robert Cremo III confessed to his actions in interviews prior to a judge denying him bond.
He went into details about what he had done.
Lake County State's Attorney Eric Reinhardt said the gravity of the crime led to that. Police discovered he perhaps planned to kill again after Highland Park.
Fox's Gernal Scott reports while on the run, the suspect spotted a July 4th parade in Madison, Wisconsin, and considered attacking it, but told investigators he'd decided he wasn't prepared for it. They heard something and they said something, and because of that, the police chief in Richmond, Virginia says they may have averted another holiday attack on Monday.
There is no telling how many lives this hero citizen made. I mean, how many lives this hero citizen saved. from one phone call.
Police Chief Gerald Smith says the tipster phoned them after overhearing plans for a mass shooting. When police raided the apartment of the alleged plotters, they seized assault rifles and hundreds of rounds of ammunition. In Detroit, a police officer is dead after intervening to stop a man who was said to be randomly firing a gun. Detroit's Police Chief James White.
Entirely too much gun violence in the city, too much gun violence in this country, and now we've got an officer who has paid the ultimate sacrifice, putting his life on the line for you and me, every single day. And officers are doing it right now, even after this call. Enough is enough.
The officer's partner fired back, killing the shooter. In Cleveland, a 19-year-old man has been sentenced to life in prison after pleading guilty to the 2020 shooting death of a Cleveland police detective and his informant as they sat in an unmarked police car. It's sentencing day today for former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin on his guilty plea to violating George Floyd's civil rights. Federal prosecutors asking he get 25 years. He's already serving 22 years in state prison for murder. America is listening to Fox News.
Gas is expensive, so let the bank come to you. Through our remote deposit capture, you can deposit your checks into your account from your phone. And with our Dynamite Bank Pacific Visa debit card, you can use your money anytime, anywhere. It's the perfect combo.
Now we're banking on the future. Services to choose. Bank Pacific, where others put branches, we place roots.
Equal housing lender. Member FDIC. Crank it up.
Listen to The Point anytime, anywhere on Odyssey. Odyssey is your new audio home for all the music, news, sports, and podcasts that matter to you. Find your favorite stations like The Point and discover more. Music stations, local and trusted news sources, sports talk and team coverage, plus today's biggest podcasts. Find it all on the Odyssey app. AUDACY.
President Biden in Ohio yesterday for a speech to union workers.
President Biden spoke to a group of Cleveland iron workers to trumpet a federal pension program funded with coronavirus relief money.
I campaigned to restore the backbone of this country, the middle class and unions.
The president announced the finalized federal rule boosting financially strapped multi-company pensions and ensuring benefits for millions of retirees will remain intact.
A lot of politicians like to talk about how they're going to do something about it. Well, I'm here today to say we've done something about it.
This marks the 6th trip to Ohio since President Biden took office, a state won twice by former President Trump and twice by former President Obama. Jared Halpern, Fox News.
Now, 4 members of British Prime Minister Boris Johnson's cabinet have resigned. Another's been fired. Johnson refusing calls to step down, even from some of his closest advisors, over what critics say was his mishandling of a sexual misconduct allegation against a senior government official. WNBA star Brittany Griner back in a courtroom in Moscow this morning, facing trial on charges she brought cannabis oil into the country. Perhaps foreshadowing the outcome, the Russian Foreign Ministry saying Griner will have the chance to appeal or ask for clemency once the verdict is in. She's been detained in Russia since mid-February. Very hot weather forecast to continue over a portion of the southern U.S. today.
A large portion of the central southern plains, mid-south, northern Mississippi Valley, and the Tennessee Valley is under either heat advisories or excessive heat warnings. Over the next several days, we'll see temperatures well up into the 90s and low 100s.
National Weather Service forecaster Tony Fracasso says while the heat will break for most areas this weekend, Texas will continue to feel it well into next week. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
First, I want to thank you all for being with us today. Josh and I wouldn't be here without your friendship and your support. Especially the campaign supporters in every village throughout the island who have joined in our effort to keep Guam moving forward.
Our leadership has seen our people through the most frightening pandemic that our generation has ever seen, and it is about to see the most vibrant comeback of an economy in the most developed island here in the Western Pacific.
With your help and your vote, we will move forward as one people, and Josh and I will always be there for every single person and family on Guam. this message.
Hafa-day, Patsy Gogri from Security Title here with information about what a title company does. The title side of our business determines who owns a property and guarantees your ownership with a title insurance policy. The escrow side acts as an independent third party, managing the transfer of money and documents between the buyer, seller, lenders, and others. Security Title has a management of real estate closings down to a science. Give us a call. We are here to help.
Well, we wrap up another great halftime show and move straight on to the green room, where I find none other than Johnny Utah calling us from Salt Lake City. Good afternoon, Johnny Utah.
Good afternoon, Judge Bob. So they took down the post. I'm shocked. Jane Flores' thesis on how Christians are supposed to be behaving.
Jane's religious,
government of Guam.
Jane's religious instructions to the masses. Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder if Bill Guam has ever taken down a post before.
Don't know, Johnny. I'm not much of a Facebooker. I got my own, but that's pretty much it.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's an interesting development. I wonder if they listen to Tall Tales.
I suspect so.
Because I'm thinking that they realized after listening to your show and your insight that, you know what, we're not right about everything. Maybe we should be listening to all perspectives, and especially Tall Tales and Judge Klitzkie, because, we don't know everything. We're not right about everything.
Yeah, but Klitzkie does.
When I first started talking to you, you said you've only been wrong once, and I forget your explanation, but it was a good one.
Yeah, that was 1947. I thought I was wrong about something, but I was actually right. But it still counts as being wrong, right?
I wonder what their next insight is going to be from the Abortion Bureau of Guam.
Well, I suppose they're the ones now that are dancing in the streets because of leaving Camacho's opinion saying that the statute is void.
Well, the election is coming, and I think all these polls. I saw that there was a poll on the Point as well. And I don't know if you guys were able to validate all those votes on there or not for who to vote, if you want MSN or if you want the Red Queen. But I just don't believe all these polls that are coming out on the internet with the media there at Guam. I think that they're all manipulated, and I think that once the voters get a chance to speak, things like what Flores did on the Abortion Bureau website, things like that, and all the other actions that have happened throughout the last 2 years are going to speak for themselves at the booth. I think the voters are going to let them know what they really think.
Well, I hope so, Johnny. I hope you're right about that.
Well, it's happening here in the mainland, and the Democrats are going, insane, trying to come up with a way to, cheat again. And win without winning. So they're all in, and when I say all in, I think the all in means I'm willing to cheat too, because all in is everything.
Yeah, I think you got a good point there, Johnny.
So, well, I just thought that was an interesting development that they took that post down. I wanted to congratulate you. I think that's a win for you.
Well, I'll take credit for it if nobody else will step forward.
I give it to you. You get credit from me.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Johnny. I appreciate it. Always a pleasure talking to you.
Yes, sir. You have a good night. Good day. Bye-bye.
We had somebody else who didn't want to talk on the air.
Kellis wanted to make a comment about the Attorney General opinion, the leave-in opinion, but I said you're going to be talking about it.
Yeah, I'm going to go to that next. I just went to Calamity Jane here for the proper foundation. So you know where Jane is, you know where Jane is coming from, etc. And Daily News for once was really on the ball. They put this story up last night about the Attorney General's opinion. So I have the Attorney General's opinion here, and I will go through it and make some comments on it, of course.
We should probably say, for all of you who practice borders, when you got the news of the opinion by the Attorney General, it's okay to be filled with joy because there's the devil whispering in your ear.
Exactly.
And that's who you're listening to.
Exactly, yeah. Okay, so got a lot of papers here. Probably have a hard time keeping track of it. Okay, so it's dated July 6, 2022, and it starts out like this. Dear Vanessa, Jane, and Lou.
Wait, which copy you got?
I got the first, the leaked draft, right?
Got it.
Yeah, he's obviously writing this to Vanessa, Jane, and Lou. At least the first couple of paragraphs, and it goes like this. The Dobbs decision is clear. It is for the legislature to decide abortion regulation, not the judiciary, not the executive branch of government. Now, that's exactly what Dobbs said, but he's tossing this out here, attempting to establish a shield. I'm in the executive branch. It's not my job. And then he goes on to the Dear Vanessa part of it. The Supreme Court of the United States in Dobbs held that through that democratic process, the people and their representatives may decide to limit abortion. In doing so, SCOTUS overrules Roe versus Wade and upended nearly 50 years of precedent that protected reproductive freedom and the right to privacy as guaranteed by the Constitution. Now, you see what I mean? This was written to Vanessa and Jane and Lou and the pro-abortion gang, right?
So is he saying he is going to follow? What he's saying is that SCOTUS made it wrong, a wrong decision.
Well,
in that whole sentence.
And that's certainly the implication. They had it right. They had it right, and then they overruled it. So they're using the language of the aborters. He's using the language of the aborters, I suppose, for good reason. Then he goes on to say, and then the next sentence says, and it's more of the same. Let me read it all together here. SCOTUS overruled Roe and upended nearly 50 years of precedent that protected reproductive freedom, the right to privacy as guaranteed by the Constitution, and the ability of women to participate equally in the economic and social life of the nation has been facilitated by their ability to control their reproductive lives. Now that sounds like one of those left-wing columnists that I read from time to time just for contrast, but it's not. It's our Attorney General opining on an important question. In anticipation of SCOTUS overturning Roe, some jurisdictions passed trigger laws, and he goes into what trigger laws, etc., are. And then he says, Guam and other jurisdictions across the country are working to determine current state of the law regarding abortion and are addressing the question of whether the laws that were passed and not enforced because of Roe have now gone back into effect. Now, I've been following this as close as I can in the papers, and the only challenges that I've seen, let's call it the resurrection phenomenon, the resurrection of a law declared unconstitutional. The only challenges that I've seen to resurrection have been based on state constitutions. The argument being, well, even if Roe is overruled and the United States constitutional ruling doesn't protect abortions, our state constitution can, so that law cannot be resurrected. Now, there may be others out there, but I haven't seen them. Then he goes on to say, it is against this backdrop that you've asked about Public Law 20-134, which the 20th Guam legislature passed in 1990, criminalizing abortion except under narrow circumstances. You've asked, given the district court's ruling the abortion ban was void and permanently enjoined, does the United States Supreme Court recent decision have any effect? Now, this was submitted by Evita and Munga Barnes. But I got to wonder, did they write it? Did they write the questions? Or was it kind of a
Probably not.
Was it kind of a Buddy Orsini type of deal? Yeah, I just wonder. I'm a curious kind of guy.
Hey, Barry.
Is the referendum mandate in Public Law 20-134 also required in order for the abortion ban to stand? And then given the original date of the referendum, we'll just not even talk about the referendum. Referendum's out of the question. Roe, no Roe, it's just out of the question. We needn't waste breath on it. Then he goes on to say, the short answer is that Public Law 20-134 violated the Constitution and the Organic Act when it was passed and is therefore void ab initio. Ab initio is a word that lawyers toss around quite frequently. I wanted to come up with a definition that would be understood by everybody. So I called up Steve Ignacio, the chief of police, and I said, Steve, can you check with your legal section to find out a good way to say that, to express the idea of ab initio? Steve said, let me get back to you on that one. And he called back a few minutes later and he said, just say from the get-go. Yeah. So turn on the Law and Order notebook here, Jose. So if you want a good Latin term, use from the get-go, because it means ab initio. Okay, the 20th Guam legislature passed Bill 848 in 1990 with the stated purpose to protect the unborn children of Guam. 848 prescribed and criminalized all abortions in Guam, making it a third-degree felony to provide abortion, a misdemeanor to solicit or submit to an abortion, a misdemeanor to solicit any woman to submit to an abortion. The legislature also included a provision for an abortion referendum, which I won't talk about anymore. Less than 1 week later, a lawsuit challenging the constitutionality of the statute was filed in what he calls the United States District Court of Guam, which it isn't. It's the District Court of Guam. And I've explained the difference before. It's a matter of life tenure in Article 3. In a decision issued on August 23, 1990, the district court stated, having determined that Roe v. Wade applies in Guam, Public Law 20-134 is unconstitutional. In granting summary judgment to the plaintiffs, the court held that the statute violated the United States Constitution, the Organic Act, and 42 United States Code Section 1983. That's the civil rights statute. It allows you to sue a public official if he has violated your civil rights. On appeal, the Ninth Circuit affirmed the district court's judgment permanently enjoining the enforcement of the public law. The Ninth Circuit held that Roe applies to Guam as it applies to the states. However, the Guam Act gives not a nod towards Roe. With two narrow exceptions, it simply negates the rights and interests of the pregnant woman and forbids her to terminate her pregnancy from the moment of conception. That's what the Ninth Circuit said. And then back to the text, the injunction remains in effect today. The questions you raise in the wake of Dobbs relate directly to the legal status of Public Law 20-134. Wow! I'd have never... This guy is really a great writer, isn't he? I'd have never thought that one. Which is now the question, given that Roe, the primary reason for the statute's permanent enjoyment, has been overruled and is no longer law of the land. We therefore first examine the current legal status of Public Law 20-134. And then he cites cases. The Guam Supreme Court has recognized the Organic Act serves as a function of the Constitution of Guam. No sense dwelling on that. Everybody knows that. The only thing I noticed here is that he cites a case called Heiser versus Department of Law and Government of Guam. He misspells Heiser, but I guess he's not paid to be a good speller. Then we go on with the opinion, and he cites a section of the Organic Act that says the legislative power of Guam shall extend to all subjects of local application, not inconsistent with the provisions of this chapter and the laws of the United States applicable to Guam. Then he cites a case called Baldwin versus Bordallo, which deals with a hospital that I don't understand what the application is. And then he says in the Ninth Circuit in Baldwin, a separation of powers case reversed the District Court of Guam decision holding that a provision of Public Law 14-91 limiting the governor's power to appoint hospital trustees violated the Organic because it ran counter to the governor's section 1421G(a) responsibility to establish and operate health services. Baldwin, under the law in question, the governor is stripped of all power to have any voice in the policies, etc. And, he's just used this to state a general principle that's not even at issue. And he fills a whole paragraph with it, I suppose so that it can look like, man, that guy really put some time in on this. The Supreme Court examined whether Section 19605 of the Emergency Health Powers Act impinged upon the governor's Section 1421G(a) Organic Act authority over quarantine. And then he goes into that declaratory judgment. And then we come back under a Section 1423 analysis. Public Law 20-134 suffers the same infirmities as the laws struck down and voided by the Ninth Circuit and the Guam Supreme Court in Baldwin and in re Leon Guerrero, respectively. In our opinion, the 20th Guam legislature exceeded its power under Section 1423 when it passed Public Law 2134. At its inception, blatantly violated the laws of the United States applicable to Guam at the time, namely Roe, and the provisions of the Organic Act extending to Guam the constitutional protections that form the basis of Roe. And once again, it takes a long, long time to state the non-controversial part. In other words, Roe found 134 unconstitutional. Let's get to the heart of this thing now. Then he goes on to say, we recognize that analysis of the constitutionality of a local statute must begin with a general rule that legislative enactments are presumed to be constitutional. And he goes through that, cites several cases. However, the record is clear in this instance that when 2134 was passed, it was clearly and unequivocally unconstitutional. During consideration of Bill 848, the legislature was advised by both the Attorney General and the legislature's own counsel on the unconstitutionality of the bill. Not relevant. Interesting, makes your arguments sound better, Levin, but completely irrelevant. Legislative Council advised the primary sponsor of the bill is introduced would probably be struck down because judges are bound by the Supreme Court decisions, etc. Then he's back to the text. We limit our opinion in this case to instances where laws are passed in clear violation of established constitutional rights. And that's where he stops. He doesn't say, we limit our opinion in this case to instances where laws are passed in clear violation of established constitutional rights when the constitutional right was abrogated by a later decision of the Supreme Court. He doesn't go there. He stops.
He's stuck in the past.
He stops at the place where he gets the answer he wants. He doesn't want to ask, he doesn't want to say, answer the question, and then the Supreme Court changes the law. Because the 20th legislature did not have the power to pass 2134, it's void ab initio, has no legal effect on Guam, et cetera, et cetera.
Wait, I have a question.
Uh-huh.
He says they did not have the power to pass it. They do. The power to pass it is in the legislature.
That's true.
What happened with 2134 was that it was deemed unconstitutional.
Well, what he's saying is that the unconstitutionality relates back to the moment that that bill was on the floor, and even though it was there, and they had 21 people, somehow you were able to get 11 of them to not pass and actually vote on the bill. Even though they did, the law didn't pass. That's what he's saying. I guess you would use the word deemed. The law is deemed to not have passed. Okay. Given our determination, let's see, is therefore void ab initio, the Supreme Court's opinion in Dobbs has no bearing on the current and future validity of 2134. Notwithstanding the permanent injunction imposed by the District Court in Ada and still in effect, Public Law 30-134 is unable to be enforced in Guam on the alternate ground that it is void ab initio. And then he has a footnote here where he cites several cases, stuff like this. Protection clause nullifies the statutory expulsion, etc. Norton versus Shelby County. And then an unconstitutional legislative act is not a law. It confers no rights. It imposes no duties. It affords no protections. It creates no office. It is in contemplation as inoperative as though it had never passed. And he's got several of these cases, and they're pretty draconian. I did a little reading of my own, and you know, there are cases that hold that things like a sheriff who makes an arrest under a statute that is later on declared unconstitutional is liable to the arrestee because he didn't have the authority to make the arrest. Some of them are pretty draconian. So I went online last night. I don't have Westlaw. I can't do the kind of legislative legal research that the Attorney General's office can and ought to. And I don't have a lot of time to do it. But I found a law review article from the Indiana Law Journal going way back to 1926. And I'll tell you what I found there right after we get back from Wrigley Field.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at GuamTraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts. Brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Subway's Eat Fresh Refresh brings you the sequel to the Sweet Onion Chicken Teriyaki. Enjoy the new Sweet Onion Steak Teriyaki. Delight your taste buds with tender, juicy steak marinated in the tangy new Sweet Onion Teriyaki sauce and stacked high on toasted artisan Italian bread, topped with American cheese, green peppers, red onions, and drizzled with the tangy new Sweet Onion Teriyaki sauce. The new Sweet Onion Steak Teriyaki is the height of food craveability. Give in to your cravings at Subway. Eat fresh.
Okay, here we are, Wrigley Field in Chicago, the world's most beautiful ballpark. Seventh inning stretch. It means I've got 2 more innings to go. And I'm working with a Indiana Law Journal article written by a gentleman named Oliver P. Field. And let's see if I can find a biographical note for Mr. Field. I can't. So it's 17 pages long, and it really goes into it. It's very, very thorough. And this is how it starts. I won't read the whole thing. I'll go to the punchline shortly. What is the effect upon a statute of a judicial decision that the statute is unconstitutional? What of the acts of persons who have relied on the statute before the decision of unconstitutionality was rendered? The practical effect of the answers which are to be given to these questions may be illustrated by 2 types of cases which have been before the courts of Indiana or the courts of other states. Suppose in the first place that an officer arrests a person by virtue of authority granted in a statute. The person arrested attacks the constitutionality of the statute. The court decides the statute is unconstitutional. The person who has been arrested brings an action of damages against the officer. Can the officer plead the statute under which he acted in justification for his act? Suppose in the second place that municipality floats a bond issue. The statute under which the bonds are issued is assailed in the courts, and they decide that it is unconstitutional. As you were, that it is constitutional. The statute under which the bond issue is assailed in the courts, and they decide it's constitutional. 6 months later, the state court decides that the statute is unconstitutional and reverses their former decision. Can the holder of the bonds recover in an action against the city? Does a declaration of unconstitutionality have the effect of repealing a statute? Or does the statute become inoperative from the time the decision which declares it unconstitutional? Or is a statute to be considered void ab initio, which means what, Jose?
From the get-go.
From the date of the purported enactment of it by the legislature. It is with the answers which courts have given these questions and others which have been presented by actual cases that the writer will deal. So that's the kind of cases, and there's 17 pages to this, so he really goes into it. And let's see if I can find a good example here. All persons are presumed to know the law, and if they act under an unconstitutional enactment of the legislature, they do so at their own peril and must take consequences. 2 cases from other jurisdictions in which there were no doubt but what acts complained of were committed before the statute was declared unconstitutional will serve as further to illustrate the application of the doctrine. In Campbell v. Sherman, the Wisconsin court was asked to pass upon these facts. The defendant sheriff, acting through a deputy, seized a steamboat belonging to the plaintiff under a writ from the circuit court of the state for the purpose of enforcing a maritime lien. The steamboat was destroyed by fire. The statute which authorized the issuance of the writ was declared unconstitutional. In an action for unlawful seizure and conversion, the sheriff set up a defense that the statute which he had relied on, in the proceedings. The officer was held not to have been, to have any defense. No defense. So he's liable for the cost of the boat. In a case called Massachusetts, in a Massachusetts case called Kelly versus Bemis, not Beavis, but Bemis. It's not.
I'm impressed.
It's not Bemis, butthead. Yeah, all right. Where was I here? A justice of the peace issued a mittimus under a statute which was later held unconstitutional. The justice of the peace was held liable in an action in trespass. So I'm getting into this part of it to show you that there is something to this idea that unconstitutionality means no statute at all. Void ab initio, void from the get-go. But then, as I mentioned, Levin didn't answer the second question. So, you know, you gotta read all the way to the end of the book sometimes to get to the answers. So at the end, Field has a summary here, and he has, in summary, the rules of law which have been followed by the courts reviewed in this article can be classified as follows. And he has 3 different classifications. 1, a situation when the court adheres to the view the statute is void ab initio. In the case of repealing a statute, an unconstitutional amendment to a statute, where a criminal conviction under an unconstitutional statute is reversed. Now, here's a really interesting one. One of the cases he cites, a person was accused of a crime. He pleads guilty to the crime. When you plead guilty, you are convicted. You don't have to go through a trial. You are convicted. Later on, the statute that he was convicted under is found to be that statute is found to be unconstitutional. A constitutional statute is then enacted. He's prosecuted again, but he defends on the basis of the double jeopardy clause. You can't hold a man twice in jeopardy for the same. So even though the first conviction didn't count, you couldn't prosecute him again. So I say some really draconian results. And I could see why Levin would seize on this, because this thing looks like it's got superpower, like it's nuclear, right? Individual liability in criminal actions for acts committed under unconstitutional statutes. Those would be void ab initio. And then category 2, situations in which the courts are in conflict whether the rule should be void ab initio or that of void from the date of declaration of unconstitutionality. For instance, creation of a public office, unconstitutional statutes as creating a moral obligation on the government, liability of officers in civil suits for acts done in reliance on unconstitutional statutes, So these are ones that say, yeah, the statute's unconstitutional, but not ab initio, only from the time that the court says it's unconstitutional. Okay, and then the third situation, situations in courts refuse to apply the void ab initio doctrine and apply the doctrine of void from the time of declaration of unconstitutionality. And there's a list there. And then items 2 and 3, reversal of a decision of unconstitutionality, situations in which courts refuse to apply the doctrine of void ab initio. 3, reversal of a decision of unconstitutionality. 3, reversal of decision of unconstitutionality with rights acquired and reliance on the first decision. Not our case, but just telling you that although void ab initio means void from the very beginning, and all these other cases say void ab initio means it's as though it never, ever existed. It's kind of a reverse it's kind of a reverse It's a Wonderful Life. You remember if George Bailey had never been born? It's kind of the reverse of that. It's as though you'd never been born, George Bailey. It's as though you'd never been born, Public Law 20-134. That's what Levin is trying to say. Now, they don't elaborate on the point that we're really interested in, but they do get into it. And let's see if I can find it quickly here. There remain a number of situations which the application of the theory that the statute is void ab initio should be tested. 1, should be tested. In other words, if you've got one of these, don't go by what I said about void ab initio. This needs to be tested. 1, suppose a case where a court declares a statute unconstitutional today and then 6 months hence reverses this decision and decides that the statute is constitutional. If the void ab initio doctrine applied, the first decision would leave a situation similar to that described by the Indiana court as though no statute had been passed. The first question that arises then is, how does it happen that there is any statute for the court to consider in the second case? Well, in our case, it wasn't our case, it was another, but the same reasoning applies. The second point which presents itself is what happens to the statute under the second decision if it be regarded as still a statute, still in the statute books after the first decision. All courts seem to agree that the void statute, parenthesis, if such a contradiction is permitted, close parenthesis, is resurrected and is effective as from the date of its enactment. All courts. And then it cites to footnote 45, and he cites to a treatise called Black on Constitutional Law, page 75, a case called Christopher versus Mungan out of Florida, State versus O'Neill out of, it's a Northwest Reporter. And then the note says, a statute was declared unconstitutional. Exit committed an act under which it would have violated it had been valid. Then the statute was held constitutional, not subject to prosecution. So this is exactly what we're talking about. Okay, exactly what we're talking about. Now, Levin doesn't have to go and find this and agree with me. I don't know why he wouldn't have seen it because when you do research on Westlaw, if you state your question properly And I just Googled unconstitutional statute, and this was the first hit. So it's not, it's not that arcane, it's not that esoteric. And I found that all courts agree, even though it's logically inconsistent to say it's void ab initio, it never existed, etc. And then to say, well, yeah, but because the constitutional interpretation changed, and they even use the same word I used, Jose. Yeah, all courts seem to agree that the void statute is resurrected and is effective as from the date of its enactment.
Simply rendered constitutional.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah, from the get-go. Okay, now, this to me prompts the really good question here, the hard question that Leland won't answer, but I'm going to pose it anyhow. Let's see who I got on. I got another Joe. Has 31 disappeared? Is there a legislature procedure to reanimate it? I'll take another Joe after we go to Churchill Downs, and then I'll give him a thorough answer.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus to naktak, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tuman location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
Choice Broadcasting introduces their unbeatable lineup of morning show.
Hands down winners of Guam's morning radio battle.
Daryl Lizama grooves his way through Boss 104 playing Guam's favorite classic hits.
Morning mouth Ray Gibson shakes the cage on 93.3 The Point.
And now, we are proud to announce the Morning Blender with Kyle Mandapat, mixing it up at sunrise on Star 101.
If you're an advertiser trying to reach the most valuable ears, we've got the shows that listeners have been tuning into for decades.
One call gets all three.
671-888-7346. That's 888-REIO.
Churchill Downs, Louisville, Kentucky. I'm almost at the home stretch here, and I've got another Joe to help me right across the line. Jose, you remember that movie Edward Scissorhands?
Yes, I remember that.
Wasn't that Johnny Depp?
That was Johnny
Depp. Well, Rico Blancafor apparently remembers also because he says The Abortionist, featuring Jane Scissorhands. Yeah, I guess I better cut that one short. So another Joe, your question was, let me go back to your question here. Your question was, has Public Law 30-134 disappeared? And I've just spent the last half hour of the show telling you about what the Attorney General thinks. He doesn't think it disappeared. He thinks it never was. It was an optical illusion, but it was never really there.
Am I really here?
And therefore, the reversal of Roe doesn't affect it. I just finished a law review article that says the opposite, that even though the statute was void ab initio when the constitutional interpretation changes, the statute is resurrected. Now, I'm going to go on to the really hard part of this in a minute, another Joe. But then you ask, is there a legislative procedure to reanimate it? Of course. The legislature could turn it into a typing exercise, just retype the whole thing, put a number on it, get the signatures and introduce it, and it'll go. And the legislature can pass or repeal any law that it feels like, old, new, or whatever. So does that answer your question, Real Joe?
About it sounds like those are the marching orders to all the pro-life Republicans in the 36th Guam legislature.
Well, that's what I said yesterday when we were talking about this is not the beginning of the end. It's not the end of the beginning. It's just the end of the beginning. And pro-lifers, yeah, don't rest on your laurels. You're going to have a lot of work cut out for you.
And I have to say that I think that was Winston Churchill you quoted there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, those are the marching orders from Bob there. Do a typing exercise, write out make a bill we can call it resurrection or the Let There Be Life bill, and pass it. And you got seven Republican senators, or in theory, and some Democrats who say they're pro-life.
Well, right now we've got 5 Republican senators and an Argentinian. Okay, another Joe.
Thanks for your time, Bob.
All right, yeah.
Are you going to go on to his conclusion? Because there's a question online of something he stated there that goes into the question of, has it been disappeared? Did it exist at all? Because it says it's currently codified, which means something exists.
Yeah. Well, I guess it's the quantum theory of statutory interpretation. Levin wraps it up like this. Moving forward, difficult and moral policy questions such as the decision of whether to allow or limit abortion must be decided by the legislature, not the courts. The 1978 abortion law currently codified at 9 GCA 3120 through 3122 remains on the books. That was the pre-Bell Areola law.
Oh, the really, really harsh ones.
Yeah. No, the really, really easy one.
Easy one.
Yeah. With Dobbs, the door is open for the current legislature, if it so chooses, to forge its own path on the profound moral question of abortion. For these times, it may be different than what your predecessors in the previous legislature chose during their respective times. Wow. Is your middle initial A, Levin A. Camacho? The people of Guam with confidence look to our elected policymakers for our island and future to meet this most important challenges. So, one of the things they do in law school is they send you to an optometrist who fits you with these lenses. You don't keep the lenses, but they train your eyes to read between the lines. I read between the lines here. It's pretty easy to tell where Levin is on this. Now, here's the hard question. I've shown you that this void ab initio is not a slam dunk. And I've shown you that Levin stated half of the law, not the important law. And I've shown you that there is authority that 2134 does resurrect and spring back into action. Now, there may be other case law on that point. I'm not saying that that's a slam dunk, but it's damn sure an issue. Now, if Levin is the only one who can move to dissolve that permanent injunction at the district court and bring the issue, the Indiana rule that I told you about, bring that before the court, and he's decided based on what I think is a short-sighted look at the law that he's not going to do it, how is that challenge ever raised? How do we ever do the right thing, the thing that the law requires the Attorney General to do? I spent a little time the other day reading Rule 25 of the Guam Rules of Civil Procedure that put the rules in place as to what a lawyer must do when he files papers in court. He's certifying to the court that he's investigated the facts, that he would be able to bring up facts or discover facts that would support the theory that he advances, that his theory is sound in law or is a good faith advancement of a new legal theory. If he can do those things, the court's not going to slap him down. There isn't any rule that I know of that requires a lawyer to bring a case. There probably should be, because the only way that the Indiana rule versus Levin's love for abortion will ever be tested is if Levin brings a motion to dissolve the permanent injunction. And that way, the ACLU and Vanessa Williams and that gang can make their Levin-style argument. He can make what I'm going to call the tall tales argument, that every court that's ever adjusted it said resurrection. And if he does that, then he's off the hook, because there will be a judicial determination of what the law actually is. As it is now, I can only look at this as Levin not wanting to do what he's supposed to do. His research is either faulty or he overlooked what I found, and really, really easily, that goes exactly against what he's saying here. So his research is either faulty or he's trying to assume some sort of impenetrable ignorance. Well, I showed you what the law was. It's up to the legislature. Excuse me, I'm out of here. Where are we going to go for cocktails, Jane and Vanessa and Lou? Can we go up to Government House, please? Yeah. So that if he doesn't do that, that to me is his job, and regardless of where he feels it should come down, regardless of what he thinks, how he thinks it should come down. If he could make a good faith Rule 11 argument, sorry, Rule 11, not 25. If he can make a good faith Rule 11 argument that advancing the Indiana rule comes within Rule 11, to me, it's not that he can do it, he must do it. He must do it. Even if he analyzes and says, yeah, I can do it, there is authority for that. Maybe he won't rule for me, but I'm going to do it anyhow. That's what he should be doing. And if he isn't going to be doing that, he really should resign and let somebody else in the office and let the governor appoint an acting attorney general. Now, and I got to contrast this with Doug Moylan. I've heard Doug Moylan say, my feelings about abortion don't matter. I'm
just
a Catholic.
about to remind you about that, yeah.
Yeah, they don't matter. He says it's the law. And attorney generals seek to enforce the law. And I suspect if Doug Moylan were given the same dilemma, it would be an easy one for him. File a motion.
I would think if your finding of the Indiana law, is that what it is?
It's an Indiana Law Review article.
A finding of that, it gets put in public, like a letter to the editor or a column. I would suggest that was more of an opportunity for the Attorney General, Levin Camacho, to see it, other than rely on tall tales. So somebody put it out there, because if he knows about it and still decides not to act upon it,
yeah,
it's almost a dereliction.
Really? Well, to me it is.
It is a dereliction.
Already.
All right.
Yeah, because with the tools that you have now, I don't know how he could have missed this. But I'm not the Attorney General. I'm just a talk show host. I'm just a talk show host who holds up this sign and says, let's go, Brandon.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Ted Lindner, Fox News. A Detroit police officer shot and killed Wednesday evening responding to a call about a man shooting indiscriminately.
The officer, upon his arrival, immediately took fire from the subject, who was armed with a Draco assault rifle. Sadly, the officer was struck and succumbed to his injuries.
That's Detroit's police chief James White, who says the officer's partner returned fire, killing the shooter. We don't have the slain officer's name yet, but we're told he was a 5-year veteran of the force and leaves behind a wife and a child. The prosecutor in Lake County, Illinois, saying the man charged with Monday's July 4th parade shooting.
He went into details about what he had done. He admitted to what he had done.
And that is prosecutor Eric Reinhart. The accused shooter initially fled to Madison, Wisconsin, and considered attacking another event before returning to Illinois, where he was captured. A judge has ordered the suspect held with bond. Tragedy averted in Richmond, Virginia on Monday the 4th when police received a tip.
A subject who I am referring to as a hero citizen picked up the phone, overheard a conversation that there was a mass shooting being planned here in the Richmond of Virginia at our 4th of July celebration.
It's Richmond's Police Chief Gerald Smith, who says 2 people have been arrested. Weapons and ammunition have been seized. President Biden in Cleveland Wednesday defending his economic policies in the face of record high inflation and high gas prices.
We came in with a fundamentally different economic vision, an economy that grows from the bottom up and the middle out. It's good for everyone, because when the middle class does well, the poor have a ladder up and the wealthy still do very well.
The president said Republicans are blocking efforts to suspend the federal gas tax, but his proposal has received little support from Democrats. America's listening.